on the broadcast. While the investigation is underway, all possible angles should be probed, and there's a special panel now that the Maharashtra government has set up when it comes to instances of quote-unquote love jihad. Let's see what really comes out of that. With that, it's a wrap. Shivani Gupta joins you with Plain Speak. Thank you for watching.
Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. Paris is on the edge after witnessing 3 days of unrest. This after a 69-year-old man opened fire and killed 3 at a Kurdish center on Friday. Soon after the fatal killings, clashes broke out between cops and Kurdish protesters in the city of Paris. Demonstrators say French security services have not done enough to prevent such attacks on their community. But can vandalism and violence be an answer to any crime or attack? Kurdish protesters went berserk. Cars were overturned, vehicles were set ablaze, shops, bus stops were damaged. Whatever came in the way of the protesters was damaged and destroyed. Even roads and pavements were broken and dug up. This is the third instance of rioting that has come to light from France alone in the last 1 month. Several other European cities are also witnessing frequent clashes or rioting with the police, especially by migrant or foreign descent communities. Europe, known for its multiculturalism, often sees many movements against migrants and the associated rise in crime since then. But it is an issue that is taboo and immediately invites labels and bans. No one really wants to talk about it and accept the concerns that locals have. But we cannot escape the realities, however troubling they may be. Back-to-back riots in European cities. Is this not a blow to the entire philosophy of multiculturalism? Haven't the rioters done more damage to migrant communities and their cause than help with such acts of violence and vandalism? We'll take those questions to our guests in just a bit. First, let's break down in pictures. Before pictures, what exactly happened in Paris. On Friday, the week gone by, a gunman opened fire at the Kurdish Cultural Center. 3 were killed in this maniac attack. The Kurdish community then hit the streets calling for justice. Police and Kurdish protesters in fact clashed in central Paris. A day later, the rioting spread even in area. Kurds have clashed with Paris police. Cars were set on fire. As I mentioned, stones were hurled at the police as well. And the cops had to resort to tear gas shelling to disperse the crowd and control the situation. This all leading up to Christmas, remember, which is an important festival in countries like France. A day later, the shooting suspect reportedly admitted to pathological hatred of migrants. The 69-year-old was transferred to a psychiatric care. Of course, the case is ongoing. But take a look at what Paris and its streets looked like over the last 2 days. As I mentioned, scores of cars were set ablaze by protesters. These are scenes that are now, of course, going viral on social media as well. This is one of those pictures. You know, the kind of rioting that Paris has seen, it really doesn't look like a Western, quote-unquote, civilized first world country. Then there are Kurdish protesters who went on a rampage. A bus shelter, for example, a bus stop was brainlessly damaged. Shops were destroyed by them as well. This is one of those footages. Now, what is to be gained out of this kind of senseless, mindless violence against the infrastructure of your own city? Look at the next video of a car being overturned by protesters. Clearly, there is millions of dollars or euros of damage that has been done, and there will be innocent people who had nothing to do with the attack or with the community or otherwise, or with the forces whose cars and properties have been damaged. But this kind of riot mentality, why was this displayed in response to an attack? The epicenter of the clash was also central Paris. Remember, these are visuals of some of the clashes breaking out between the protesters and the police. Some of the measures that the police had to take. But look at the numbers, the sheer numbers that are running through the streets of Paris. As I mentioned earlier, police had to use tear gas shells and other means to disperse the crowd and control the situation. Just by the sheer number of police that is there on the Paris streets, you can make out exactly what would have been the situation in the city. Like I mentioned, these are not out of the ordinary happenings in Europe anymore. Let's take a look. In December 2022, this month alone, there were riots in France and Belgium, for example, post Morocco's loss in the FIFA World Cup semi-final. Just before that, there was riots in Belgium and Netherlands after Morocco had one of their early shock wins at the World Cup. It is important to also add here that French fans themselves have rioted post France's loss in the final. Now, in April 2022, violence broke out in Sweden over Quran burning protest plans. This has been a simmering issue in Sweden over the many years, with groups opposing Muslim ghettoism and fundamentalism. June 2020, France's Dijon again rocked by unrest by Chechens who were allegedly seeking revenge for killings from their community. But this also goes back many, many years. February 2017, riots in Stockholm, a suburb, were reported after police tried to arrest a drug suspect. Now, these are the kind of crimes that are often reported from many European cities, where it is now said by locals that police can't even enter certain no-go areas, even on criminal complaints. This will sound familiar to many in India. In France, it hasn't been just the issue of insult to the Prophet, for example, that has seen beheadings, but also for many years writing on other issues. This is an example from 2014, where a rally against Israel descended into chaos and looting in Paris. As far back as October 2005, there was a 3-week rioting in Paris that was reported post the deaths of 2 foreign descent youths under police action. So the big debate that's coming up today, is this not a blow to multiculturalism that Europe has fought for and has stood for? And are there any lessons to be learned here for the rest of the world?
Aujourd'hui, c'est que
10 years after the triple murder of the Kurdish activists, we face an attack today once again. The French authorities have failed to protect our structure, the Democratic Council of Kurds in France.
Let's go across to the guests who are joining us. Ratan Sharda, RSS researcher and author. Atikur Rahman is an Islamic scholar. Sushant Sareen is senior fellow, ORF. Rajiv Dogra is former diplomat. And Tariq Fateh is author, columnist, who's actually joining us from Toronto. Tariq Fateh, why don't I ask you first up? I mean, you are joining us from Toronto. You lived in Canada. I'm sure you're very sympathetic to the cause of migrants or immigrants. Isn't what has happened in Paris a blow to actually the cause of the immigrant or the migrant community, many of whom have taken shelter in their new base in Europe? What explains this behavior that you're destroying the very city that has, that has come to give you shelter over the years?
Well, you have to take the facts as they speak. The man involved in the shooting is an outright self-admitted racist who doesn't consider anyone who's not white to be worthy of living in France. And that contradicts the whole essence of the French Revolution without going into further details. You have to understand Europe has a declining population, and it is not out of nowhere that Moroccans or North Africans have settled over there. Indians have settled in Trinidad and Tobago and Fiji and Guyana. It's no wonder there is a prime minister in Great Britain who is of Indian ancestry. So the world's population has been shifting as a result also of a lack of natural childbirth. The birth rate is negative, and the birth rate of people in the developing countries is higher. There's a natural flow of people settling elsewhere, and it's a direct result of colonialism.
But is this because there is a population shift happening, or is there a mindset issue problem as well? Like, why would you riot in response to a crime or an attack? Because if that was acceptable as a response, then, we'd all be killing each other.
No, but if a Kurdish community, which is without a state, primarily because of the European slicing up the Middle East with the geometry box after the First World War, and Kurdistan disappeared. So a country just disappears, you're going to have some after effect. It's like at some stage, Balochistan or the overseas Baloch will, rebel and ask for their rights. The Rohingya today are on the seas. We just heard reports of 2 shiploads of nearly dead Rohingyas escaping and landing in Indonesia. The world population is shifting, and people will go where they can exist. If you are
But
living
why
in
destroy? That's precisely the question I'm asking, Tariq Fateh. Why destroy exactly the city? Destroy exactly the city where you're seeking shelter? Like global politics aside, but how does this help anybody?
Oh, this helps. It's not a question. A Kurdish center is attacked by a man who says that I don't like non-white people. It's so simple. How else would you explain the very racist nature of the criminal?
No,
Oh,
Tariq Fateh, my point is that this is not a response to a racist attack. If this
It
was
is.
a response to, for example, Islamic terror, bombings and shootings, imagine what will happen.
No, this is not a response to anything. The Kurds are hardly people who are fighting for a religion. It's probably the most secular and irreligious
No, I'm not
community.
saying this is religious, but I'm saying that even if there is a racist attack, violence and vandalism in response to that doesn't help your cause.
Of course it doesn't, but we, from the subcontinent, we know that always there is a response. There are multiple ways of responding, and this is part of it. There are Bhagat Singhs that are born, and there are people who are using the same cause and don't sacrifice themselves but kill others. These are natural outgrowths of colonialism that will follow Europe throughout because they have a negative population growth. They need people, they can't get people. The United States had a negative population growth just in the last year. Where are you going to get people? The women saying we don't want children. How are you going to feed the industrial base of that? So when people come in and you have a community as peaceful as the Kurds, living in France, having no connection whatsoever with any terrorist organization, and somebody comes in, he didn't kill because they were Kurds. He said, I don't want to see any non-French.
Migrants, yeah.
So my grandmother is French. I mean, what will happen to me if
No, absolutely. There is absolutely no justification for the kind of violent racist attack that has come to light. Let me take this to our other guests as well. So, Shan Sareen, what do you think is really happening? Because, this isn't, we're discussing this on the back of this latest writing, but as I mentioned, there are several instances of writing that are coming to light from quote-unquote first world developed countries, which wouldn't see such scenes at least in the last 200 years. These are more closer to home. But now this is something that entire Europe is discussing. Is this something deeper that is taking place?
Yeah, I think there is something deeper. Part of it is, of course, as Mr. Fateh describes, that there is a population change taking place. Even in France, for example, I think you have almost about 15% of the people who are of the immigrant community. It is reflective of the kind of tensions which are building up in that society. And part of the reason for the tensions building up are multiple, actually. But one reason for the tensions building up is many of the immigrants who have gone into those societies, and I'm not talking about this particular case, although I'll come to this in a bit. Part of the reasons for these tensions building up and suddenly this massive revival of the racist white supremacists in Europe, not only that of the right-wing parties in Europe. One of the reasons for that is that many of these immigrant communities have simply refused to assimilate. And the result is, and of course, there is also the other problem of racism or latent racism of glass ceilings and stuff like that. But even when that gets breached, there is a refusal by a lot of people to assimilate in that society. Now, you can keep your own culture, you can keep your own traditions, and yet you can assimilate in the society to which you migrated for a better life. Now, if you want to take all the crap which you left behind into a society which you aspire for and then carry, that crap and want to keep it out there, then obviously there will be a reaction coming forward. And if I was to trace this tit for tat kind of a thing, then I would trace it to, a lot of the kind of radicalism which we have seen in, especially in the Muslim communities in parts of Europe, in other parts of the world. So there is that factor. But in this particular case, you could go into the background of why did this guy become a racist? Was he a racist? Was
No,
he
there's
not a
no
racist?
justification
There
for
are
that.
there are some conspiracy theories that the Turks probably put this guy up to this job because the Turks have an axe to grind with the Kurds. And as Mr. Fateh very correctly says, the Turks the Kurds are a very secular people. They do not do what many of the other immigrant communities do. I would imagine they are far more assimilated than anybody else. But then this becomes a problem. So, for example, in the UK, if you have the Pakistanis spread all kinds of guns in the UK, you think the Indians are going to be left behind? They are not going to be singled out
Yeah, they'll face
also,
the
because
backlash as well.
how does somebody make out whether somebody is from India or somebody is from Pakistan? So this becomes then a problem for other immigrant communities as well as the Kurd. It has happened to the Kurds. But then again, the point which you raised that something really nasty has happened. It's an unspeakable crime to go and kill people like this. But should the reaction have been what it is? But then that reaction is probably reflective of the deeper tensions which are running through the society, which then brings me to the point, Shivani, that and not in the case of France. The French don't do it with us, but you have many of these others, especially from the Anglo-Saxon world, the woke media in the US and the UK and other places, which pontificate, which are sanctimonious about how things are being run in other countries. And then when this happens in their own backyard, you have these guys scurrying around seeking cover and giving disingenuous explanations for what has happened. But yes, I think this is a trend which you will increasingly see in Europe, and then this is going to lead to a kind of a spiral in which the white supremacists, the racists, the right-wing parties will get further strength, and there will be a reaction among the immigrant communities, sometimes violent, public violence, and sometimes in the form of terrorism. So I think we are looking at nasty times ahead.
Yeah. Let me also bring in Rajiv Dogra on this. Sir, because Tariq Fateh mentioned how an Indian a person of the Indian descent, Rishi Sunak, is today the UK Prime Minister. I thought it would be important for me to mention that, wherever the Indian community is settled in large numbers, for example, in US and UK and in other parts of Europe, they are by and large considered very welcomed and peaceful. They have risen through the ranks. We know what Indian engineers, even writers, artists have managed to do, politicians have managed to do in all of these countries they have adopted. So Indians don't generally face this issue, but there is a larger issue that we are witnessing in Europe. For example, in UK, Pakistani gangs alleged and accused of grooming young girls, leading to rapes and all. There are members of their community that the police and the political community that accepted that we never acted on it because we would be termed Islamophobic. You look at what's happening in Sweden or in other parts of the Nordic world as well, where there are reports after reports coming in of no-go areas, especially in immigrant or migrant communities that have become ghettoized, which is very close to home. These are things we talk about in India, for example. So I'm just driving to the point is that, law and order, good law and order, quote unquote, which is sometimes, the absence of which is sometimes blamed in India for what is happening, is actually not the only reason why these things happen. These things are now happening in Europe, in all of these Western developed world that have good law and order, that have good response times, etc., good laws, freedoms of all kinds, and yet we see these crimes happening in these countries.
Well, to put it all on law and order would be simplifying things too much. The issue is far more complex, and the issue has many shades. Indians, you mentioned, the first generation of Indians, whether they went 200 years back to East Africa and to the Indies, the West Indies and so on, Trinidad, Guyana, and other countries in that large area, or in England in 50s, they were They made themselves part of the society by working their way up. They went as largely uneducated lot. Some of them had to work for generations as labor and then rise up slowly as shopkeepers and so on. The next wave of Indians who went as engineers, doctors, and scientists and so on, and they assimilated more quickly in the society. But whether it was the first wave or the second wave of more educated people, one uniformity informed every Indian migration, and that was that they were a peaceful lot. But this was not the case with many of the other migrants. For example, the case of France. The French speaking colonies of Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, from where most of the migration took place in France, came in but did not assimilate despite knowing the language very well. So, what you have today is a lot of youth who are unemployed, who are angry, and police in turn distrust them. So, there is a major issue of lack of trust between young people whose parents came in into France and the police, which leads to frequent clashes. The second thing is the term you had used right in the beginning of multiculturalism, whether it's still on. Multiculturalism in Europe started after the Second World War in times of prosperity, when they needed more workers to come in and immigration was relatively free. And at that time, it was the hope in Europe that the new arrivals and the population of their country would assimilate. And that is why the term multiculturalism, that together many flowers will bloom. But David Cameron, the former Prime Minister of UK, since you mentioned Rishi Sunak, his predecessor a couple of times removed, in a conference in Munich a couple of years back, he said multiculturalism is dead. Now, it is dead virtually, in not just in France, but in Belgium, Holland, England, and Sweden now, because times have changed. Europe is no longer prosperous, and migrants are sullen and angry. They want quick results, they want quick jobs and better paying jobs, which they are not getting. So, on top of that, they chose to stay in silos, in ghettos.
In ghettos,
where, as you said, in many parts, even police couldn't go. So, a small incident, a small writing somewhere in isolation becomes a huge flare up. And that is what is happening in France in particular, because its migrant population is 14% of the entire French population today. And second, please don't forget that France in particular has a history of protests. Now, there is a difference between protests and rioting. But the dividing line is very thin. After all, France was the originator of that huge French Revolution in 1789. And then in 1968, there was this student protest, which became a worldwide phenomenon.
But as you very rightly said, Mr. Dogra, there's a difference between protests and rioting and vandalism. What we're seeing, for example, over the last 3 days, what we saw post the Morocco matches in the World Cup, you know, those are not justifiable under any pretext, even if the pretext is that there is something wrong that is being done to the immigration, the migrant population in these countries. But I want to very quickly ask you, you talked about what David Cameron said, but I want to ask you, do you believe that all of these countries in Europe are going to quickly shun away their openness to migrants very soon, to completely clamp down on it, given what is happening, given the protests from their own communities as well?
Yes, certainly. I think it's going to increase even more because times are not good in Europe. Second, if your protest takes frequent form of anger and frequent form of violence, then you are shunned by the larger society. As it is, France is known for its racism, but this racism is getting more accentuated in form also of the change in the political dimension.
Yeah,
The
but you
right
know,
wing,
racism is something that a lot of these European countries are known for. You can experience it in America also. I'm sure Indians have been some of the worst receivers, some of the most frequent receivers of racism. Response to racism like this, actually, I don't think help the cause of anti-racism. It only fuels it. But I'll go across to our other two guests who haven't spoken. Ratan, Sharda, do you believe that all of those who preach to India a lot about, you know, how in India, frankly, there are so many people of different ethnicities, religion who live together by and large peacefully, but Europe is getting a little bit, Europe is now maybe possibly coming to understand how difficult it is sometimes? Despite all freedoms, all accesses, everything, why are such large sections of migrant communities rioting so frequently in Europe? And they preach to India so many times, for example, on treatment to minorities.
Shivani, thanks. But first of all, let us not compare India with Europe because India has been assimilating, has been very open to migrants since time immemorial.
Yeah, sure.
So that is the reason the people have generally been assimilated in this country very happily. They have lived happily. They have been given enough space to grow. That is one side. While on the other side, European countries have been generally colonial, racist, and they had slaves. They had all kind of exploitation of the people. I'll tell you, in 2006, I had gone to Europe for the first time. When I went to Notre Dame, I went to UK. I could see the resentment of the migrants of Morocco and Algeria, etc., who willfully created nuisance in the areas around the place in Paris and even in Belgium, in UK. And I said at that time, in next 10 years, France, Belgium, etc., will go down the tube. And you see what's happening around the same time. Because one is that resentment of the migrants who chose to come to the country, did not go to any Arabian country, they came to Europe for better prospects. But having come here, they had that resentment against the colonialists, against the racist way they were being treated. But this this kind of resentment built up, and this exclusivism built up after around 1980s. In Belgium, way back when I was there at that time also, there was typical no-go areas. There was no violence, there was no European resentment, there was no crisis of 1.6 million Syrians and others moving into Europe. It was inherent. We have in UK 11 mayors, 15 MPs, 15 peers, but still there is resentment by the community there, the Muslim community. Earlier, all the Asians, all the Indians, but when they did something good, they were called Asians. When they did something bad, it was called Pakis. Even Indians were called Pakis. So as rightly pointed by one of the panelists, that for them, whether it's a Pakistani or a Bangladeshi or Indian, for them it was same. So when a Pakistani misbehaved, it became an issue for Indians also. And while in India, we talked about exploitation of Indians in all the Girmitia nations where our subcontracted laborers went as a kind of bonded labor, we had Prime Minister in Fiji coming up and he was overthrown. Did Indians go on a rioting spree? They did not. They adjusted the situation. So there is an inherent difference between the Hindu population and Indian Muslims who go outside and the other Islamic country migrants who have a different nature of looking at the things. So unless we have see, UK tried 3 decades of de-radicalization. It didn't work because when their clerics, their religious leaders ghettoize them, create specific kind of demands from them, they want Sharia in Europe, but they don't want to go to Sharia compliant countries. So we have agriculturism which has made whites into some kind of guilt trip because of colonialism and past history. So that kind of resentment in the whites where they are being treated stably because they are being made to be guilty for something that was done 200 years back by their
and if you applied the same logic to all
everything.
History, then you know what will happen. You know, whatever has happened in history cannot be used as a guilt trip mechanism.
People like Mr. Tariq Fateh justify racist violence because Kurds are non-violent. I think if we say we justify such violence as a retributive violence as some kind of justification, then we are looking at a very bleak Europe in coming years.
Why Europe? Look at what will happen in India. If present day Muslims were being attacked or were guilt because of what happened, for example, under Mughals, Tariq Fateh, you know, this is going to be an endless cycle. We can't go back to history to justify today's violence, especially when you have taken shelter in a country for a better life.
Shivani,
I don't understand this mindset.
Shivani.
Answer that.
One second, Tariq Fateh, I'll give you time. Let Ratan Sharda finish. Yeah.
See, Indians never blamed Muslims of today for what happened in the past.
Exactly.
It is their leaders, their past, their clerics who are trying to own the invaders. That is the difference.
Okay,
Mr.
Tariq
Tariq Fateh,
Fateh.
please.
Sir, I have limited time. Tariq Fateh, please a minute, then I have to go to Atikur Rahman.
You have a Kurdish community center being killed, attacked by a gunman, and people killed inside. And I get the impression that you are blaming the Kurds for that.
No, absolutely not, Tariq Fateh. Nobody blamed the Kurds for that attack.
What
Absolutely
happened?
not. But my question is, for example, when shootings happened in Paris or bombings happened in Paris by Islamic terrorists, if Parisians had decided that we are going to take a revenge for that attack against Muslims, for example, or avenge that attack, imagine what would have happened. So I'm just saying this is not a good response to any violent attack.
It's not a question of a good response or not. Even the president of France has acknowledged that the real crime being committed was by that man.
Of course it is the crime. Of course it is a crime.
And nobody even in France is saying that this is something that is out of the ordinary. When you conduct an affair, what was once known as the red belt around Paris is today the green belt, because you've taken out politics from the system and you've inculcated multiculturalism over there, where people
but
are
sir, that
allowed.
may be, let's say, just a definition of what has happened in this case. I've read out several instances of rioting that have taken place in countries like Sweden, France, Netherlands, Belgium, which has nothing to do with the Kurd community.
No, just a second. But in all these countries, there are members of parliament who are from communities, who are ministers sitting in Finland, who are from Somalia and Sudan and other places. The French ban on the burqa came about after 4 Muslim members of the French parliament got together. And
point
being that there is not this notion that the immigrants have not integrated, and therefore, otherwise the Khalistan movement in Canada and England would have died long time ago. We have a defense minister in Canada who supports Khalistan. We have the leader of the left-wing NDP.
So I'm not sure how both of these are similar issues. But anyways, Sushant, did you want to add 30 seconds? I have to go to Atikur Rahman as well.
Yeah, 2 very quick points. One, I think Mr. Fateh is not able to understand a very simple point. Nobody is defending the murder of the Kurds or the racist attack on the Kurd center. What we are questioning is the response to that, the rioting on the streets, and even if the French president says that the only crime committed was that murder and the rioting is perfectly kosher, then I think the French president probably has lost his marbles, number one. Number two, I think there is, for every rule, there is an exception. And I think Mr. Fateh has mentioned the exception in the case of the Indians. The kind of dirt which the Khalistanis have spread, for example, in Canada, the kind of crimes they are involved in, the drug running they are involved in, the violence they are involved in, they give the entire Indian community a bad name. And yet, because they have certain numbers, they have certain members of parliament, 2 of them, Mr. Fateh has already recounted to you, they seem to have got a free pass. Right. And I don't see how that justifies the actions of the Khalistanis and the kind of tolerance for them, just as I don't understand how the tolerance for rioting on the streets can be justified.
I'm also wondering what would be the response of open-minded people to this kind of frequent rioting that they're witnessing now. Like I mentioned, this is not even what you witness in Indian cities anymore with this regularity. I'm just driving that point. So imagine what would those who have lived in France feel about this culture in their cities. I don't think any right-minded person will welcome this. But I'm running out of time. I have to give Atikur Rahman some time as well. Atikur Rahman, do you believe that there is indeed an emerging problem where migrant communities, especially let's say from African or the Middle East or other distressed Muslim communities, are not really settling in well in countries that are opening up their arms to them? And this could have a reverse reaction.
No doubt, Shivani, the problem is, what I think is, assimilation takes time. And who migrates, Shivani? The people who are in need, they migrate. They are not affluent people. So as far as assimilation goes, it takes time. Second important aspect is this particular problem is having many realities also and many things cosmetic also. The reality is the moving populations around the world, and the cosmetic aspect is the ultra-nationalism, Shivani, that the people, the common people are racist. Here the government of India is making a racial law which is known as the CAA.
Oh my God. What does race have to do anything with the CAA? I could still understand if you said religious, but what does race have to do with that? Okay, unfortunately, I do not have enough time to bring in CAA into it, but do you want to add anything else as far as this issue is concerned?
Of course, this issue I told you, moving populations cannot be expected to assimilate over time. And both the governments, the people moving from one to another have to have a policy. Are they organized labor? They are unorganized industries, Shivani. Give them time, they will assimilate.
Okay.
The governments will have to take proactive action in this.
All right, I have to leave it at that. I do thank all the gentlemen for joining us. Time to slip into a very short break. On the other side, is there a pornographic and soft porn epidemic in India? CIC Uday Madhurkar joins us on his campaign against explicit content, especially online.
This 20-year-old was found hanging in her makeup room on the TV set of the serial that she was shooting with. Her ex-boyfriend is also her co-star, who is now in police custody. 4-day custody has been granted to the police and questioning is on. CNN News 18 is tracking all the developments as far as the investigation goes. And for now, we can tell you is that the police believes that the investigation or the relationship between the two was over. 15 days ago is when they broke up. Whether it was mutual or not, what kind of emotional trauma the actor had to go through and what led up to her alleged suicide is something that is still under investigation. And Mihir, my colleague, now joins us to get us more details of what's the latest. Mihir, so far, how many people have been questioned or statements have been recorded of her crew or for family members we're given to understand?
Absolutely. In fact, even today, the police did visit the particular set where the serial was being shot, where these two were part of that particular serial where this incident happened. So the police is constantly trying to gather as many statements as possible of people who were close to the couple, the people who were present at that point in time. Remember, nobody really figured out that something like this has happened until they found her missing for a long time on the set, and that's when people started inquiring. There are few of them who entered or broke open that particular door and found her in that situation. Now these people's statement has been recorded. Apart from that, there are several other people who are known to the couple, who know about their relationship, who closely worked with them day in and day out, including some of the family members who are aware of the situation as far as Tanisha is concerned. So all these people are being questioned and their statements are being recorded by the police. Now the police is trying to gather some sort of evidence on the charges made by the family based on which the complaint has been filed. It's a case of abetment, and the police is trying to investigate and find out if Shizan really had certain statements or conversation which led to the instigation or pinpoints that it could mean that he was trying to instigate her to the extent of her taking such an extreme step is something the police needs to establish, and it's working in this direction. Remember, there are certain other angles that the police is not ruling out at this point. The mother has come out and spoken exclusively and for the first time broken her silence and clearly stated that the daughter was in a relationship. The person who was in a relationship with the daughter asked her to break up, considering he had certain reasons, but as far as the family is concerned, as far as the mother is concerned, he cheated on the daughter. He kept her in the dark because he was already having a relationship with other women, and he also promised her that they will get married, and that these are the things that really broke her heart and led her to that particular point where she took that kind of extreme decision.
After TV actor Tanisha Sharma's untimely demise, which sent shockwaves all across the country, big allegations are now being made by her mother. Her mother has alleged that Tanisha's co-star and her ex-boyfriend, who's now in police custody, Shizan Khan, cheated on her, gave her a false promise of marriage. She's also alleged that he kept Tanisha involved even when he was seeing other women. Now remember, the police had arrested Shizan Khan on charges of abetment to suicide on Sunday, and according to police sources, Shizan has revealed in his initial statement that both the actors were in a relationship and they had to call it quits because there was an age gap. There were also differences over their religion. Now, post the arrest of Shizan Khan, the BJP has come out and added their own twist. They claim this is a case of love jihad and that angle needs to also be investigated.
मैं सबको आप सब मीडिया वालों को ये बताना चाहती हूँ कि शिजान ने टुनीशा को धोखा दिया, उसके साथ पहले रिलेशनशिप बनाया, शादी का वादा करके फिर उसने टुनीशा से ब्रेकअप किया और उसका पहले किसी लड़की के साथ इन्वॉल्वमेंट थी। उसके बावजूद भी टुनीशा को उसने इन्वॉल्व रखा अपने साथ, 3-4 महीने उसको यूज़ किया। बस मैं इतना कहना चाह रही हूँ कि इसको सज़ा मिलनी चाहिए, शिजान को नहीं छोड़ना। मेरा बच्चा गया है, बस बाकी मीडिया बहुत कोऑपरेट कर रही है। मैं तहे दिल से शुक्रिया करती हूँ मीडिया का।
इन लोगों का मतलब मिलना जुलना था, अच्छे दोस्त थे। उसके बाद पता नहीं क्या हुआ, अभी पिछले 15-20 दिन पहले तुनिशा को एंजाइटी सेट पे अटैक आया था, तो इन लोगों ने उसको एडमिट किया। तो हम लोग वहाँ पहुँचे तो उसने सिर्फ इतना बोला, मैं भी था, उसकी मम्मी भी थी, डॉक्टर भी थे, कि मेरे साथ चीटिंग हुई है, मेरे साथ गलत हुआ है, वो ऐसा कैसे कर सकता है, ये सब बोल रही थी। वो बार बार रिपीट कर रही थी एक ही बात को। बस तभी पता चला कि कुछ प्रॉब्लम चल रही।
Welcome back. From time to time, questions have been raised over pornographic content and its availability in India. In 2018, the centre directed internet service providers to block 800 plus websites that hosted pornographic content. But data shows blocking websites hardly results in effective curbs, as X-rated content can be easily accessed even by minors. In fact, some would argue pornographic content and even soft porn is all pervasive in the digital world. Overall, consumption of internet porn has increased over the past years, with traffic shifting to other sites and the use of proxy servers. Then there is the spurt of adult content and themes on OTT platforms, again an area where parental control and access is tough to regulate. Is this becoming an epidemic in India, where young minds are being bombarded with X-rated content and are also leading to more and more sexual crimes, even rapes and gang rapes being committed by minors themselves? Needless to say, this has become one of the biggest headaches for parents and community at large. How to protect adolescents, especially from explicit content, in a day and age when even songs refer to rapes and violence? That's a big focus today. And joining me first is Uday Madhurkar, Information Commissioner of Government of India. He has started a campaign called Save Culture, Save Nation to wage a battle against porn addiction and explicit content. So I saw that you've started this content, Udayji. Can you begin by telling me what was the genesis of this idea and why are you raising this particular issue today?
You see, I have been very serious about it for the last about 17-18 years. If you remember, there is a film called Jisma which had come in, I think, 2003 or 2004. That time I had red flagged many people who were concerned about this whole thing, you know. Thereafter, of course, social media platforms have come and it has gone far ahead. The basic issue is that there is a lobby in this country which is trying to earn money by selling sexual perversion. And that is the main cause of rape. If you read about what Asha Devi, the mother of Nirbhay, said last week when the 10th anniversary of that incident was remembered.
Yes.
She said that when the entire country came out in support of my daughter, I thought that I will see improvement. I will see that the number of rapes come down. But today I think they have increased, and there are most horrendous cases. People don't even, people just read and forget. If you look at things, you know, about 10 years ago when there used to be rape case, we used to really get perturbed as to what is happening. Today there is rape on toddlers. There was a rape in Palghar 4 days ago, 15-year-old girl being taken by a boy, and about 8 people raping her over a period of 12 hours. So this is a very serious situation, and this has got a direct connect with the kind of content which is being given by content producers. So my idea is that nation has to rise against people who want to sell sexual perversion to earn money in the name of art, in the name of freedom, in the name of many other things. Shivani.
No, when it comes to pornography, one of the issues you've raised, we all know there are multiple studies on the impact of pornography or pornographic content on young minds. But when we do speak about this, the biggest difficulty is how to control it, especially in today's digital age. You know, even if there is a curve by age, content is so all pervasive that young kids get their hands onto this content. Isn't that the biggest challenge today?
No. You see, yesterday I had my first program in Bhopal, which is under the label of Save Culture, Save Nation campaign. It was very well attended, and a lot of people came out with ideas. For example, Dubai, Singapore and China to a great extent have been able to control it. So it is difficult, but if you got the will, there is a way. There is technology available to, you see, for example, yesterday something which came to my notice was that there is an application in every phone called parental control.
Yeah.
Nobody is using it. Now what is happening is that there is a child who is about 8 years old, and he starts seeing pornography on phone. 10 years. So, you know, I personally believe where there is a will, there is a way. And my attempt is to build a campaign against this menace. You know, India cannot become a Vishwaguru with this situation. We are priding ourselves in saying that we will become a Vishwaguru. Now, Vishwaguru has a spiritual element. How will you become Vishwaguru with this kind of a thing? And Dubai, I am repeating, Dubai, Singapore and China have controlled this.
Okay.
And it is not about pornography. See the OTT, the kind of abusive language which is used. No cultured family can see an average OTT film for more than 5 minutes. This is the situation.
Speaking of this OTT content, the question that will also arise is, how is this material being cleared? Ultimately, there has to be a body that clears this material, or in fact, there are cases where no appropriate rating or coding is put to content that is clearly adult in nature. Isn't that the biggest issue here then?
You see, my idea is to build awareness. I think they are there doing their job. People can question them, but my idea is to build a public campaign on this. The kind of public campaign we saw against corruption in 2011-12. I think we need that of a campaign, and I invite everybody to join. And this is a campaign which can unite the nation. It cuts across religion, it cuts across caste, it cuts across regions. It cuts across political parties, so to say. Everybody who is concerned can join this and run his own campaign in his area. Idea is to, you see, teachers and parents have a major role to play. They are also responsible for this. If teacher, you see, take the example of Facebook, Shivani. Horrendous. Facebook is showing films of sexual perversion between father-in-law and daughter-in-law, between teacher and students. And I mean, there is nobody to protest, nobody to take action. So I think the country has to unite, cutting across all lines. Religion, caste, region, parties, everybody can come together on this issue.
Okay, I'll leave it
Shivani.
at that. Uday Madhurkar, thanks a lot for speaking to us and setting up our debate. Let's take this across to our guests joining us. Gautam Chintamani is a film historian, Trisha Shetty is an activist, Kasturi is an actress, and Dr. Jayanti Datta is a clinical psychologist. I have limited time, so I'll try and give everybody a couple of minutes to put their points across. Kasturi, I'm coming first to you. Don't you believe that there is indeed an epidemic of extremely racy, X-rated, almost soft pornographic material on OTT content? Is this a way to make a quick buck, even, at the cost of really spreading, perverse sexual behavior amongst young kids in India as well?
Hi, Shivani. First off, glad to be on the same panel and be able to listen to Sri Uday Madhurkar's thoughts live. While we all agree, I don't think anybody will disagree that yes, there is a proliferation of probably inappropriate content. Definitely, as you said, there is, if there is one project, one output that justifies the sex and the violence that is depicted in itself, then there are 100 imitators who just want to ride the wave and just peddle the sex, peddle the violence. They don't care who watches it as long as, it creates a quick buzz and a quick buck as well. I agree with all that. But that said, I don't agree that OTT content by itself, regulation or restriction of any content for that matter, will suddenly change our society. In fact, I have a huge problem with somebody saying that movies or audiovisual material, it used to be movies. Movies used to be the whipping boy before. They used to blame cinema in theaters, on TV. अरे ऐसा content देखकर हम बर्बाद हो रहे हैं, हमारे बच्चे टीवी में देख रहे हैं. So today we are singing a different tune. Today it is OTT. Tomorrow it will be something else. There is going to be audiovisual content. There are going to be videos that are available to our society. Today, as you yourself said in your prologue, in your preamble, if India doesn't produce it, India restricts it, there are ways and means to get whatever you want, however detrimental it may be, however offensive it may be, at your fingertips. If you want it, you can. This is active entertainment. It's not passive where you have to switch on a TV. It's not passive where you have to go to a cinema theater to ruin yourself. You just open your phone and you can get it at your fingertips. If you want it, you will get it regardless of how many restrictions are placed. And this is happening in China. This is happening in Singapore. So restriction and regulation are one part of the story.
No,
but
restriction and bans possibly do not work. But do you feel that regulation will also not work? Where there are strict guidelines on who can watch that content, there are parental controls, kids control, and proper ratings?
We need to understand that rape, I want to call, as a feminist and as an advocate, I want to concentrate on the matter of rape. Mr. Sri Uday ji ne kaha ki this is the primary reason of rape. Ma'am, rape is a historical and social issue in India. Let us not frivolize it by saying it is triggered by movies. No. It is triggered by OTT.
No, I don't think he said this was the primary reason, but he said that there is a proliferation of such content and this is adding to that kind of perversion in society. He didn't say it was a primary reason for rapes.
Rape has gone up. No, Nirbhaya was not triggered by movies. This is a caste-ridden religion, caste, hierarchy, social authority, power. Rape is a power and accessibility issue.
Fair enough. I think those issues are also pretty acceptable as far as sexual crimes against women are concerned. In any case, this is a gender crime which is done to women, to subvert them. So I'm not denying that reality at all.
So
Let me bring in
that understanding. People need to see. I have a wine shop right outside my house. My parents have taught me not to drink. Right? Drinking is a big menace in this society. In fact, that is a bigger cause of rape and sexual attacks.
No, but that's precisely the point. No, Trish, that's precisely the point, Kasturi. For example, there needs to be great. Kasturi, one second. Can I take this to my other guests as well?
The property really increase awareness among individuals.
Yeah, so I'll come to that. Kasturi, just 1 second. Just yield. I don't want to talk over you. I need to go to my other guests as well. But this is primarily the issue that, anything in per se cannot be the justification of any crime. But sexually explicit content in the hands of young children, it has a very detrimental impact on their psychology. And there are several studies for that. And there are obviously, for example, pornographic or soft porn material is very derogatory to women. Many young kids don't understand that that's not how sexual relationships go in life. Porn is not what a real sexual relationship is. I have very limited time, unfortunately, so I'll give Gautam the first minute. Gautam, do you believe that there is a need to restrict such content because of how easily it gets into the hands of children?
I totally agree that there is the need of the hour is to make sure that you not only control what is being put out there, but also the way it is being accessed. Arguments that everybody is presenting here, they do have a valid point, but we fail to understand one thing, that we are not in a utopian situation. Now, what OTT is doing and what I think Udayji is trying to highlight, or what I think a lot of people are missing out, is that OTT is normalizing the kind of content which would have been tabooed just 10 years ago.
Right.
Yes, Nirbhaya is not directly related to OTT content or porn content, but watching a show about Nirbhaya, watching a show about that kind of perversion may and can very well trigger young minds. Young minds are impressionable minds. They may want to experiment. They may want to try something. And parents these days also feel guilty that they're not being able to give that much time to their children. And access to technology is very, very, very easy. I'll give you an example. What it has done is that it has normalized something which should be very alarming. I'll give you a small little example. I mean, let's take the whole artistic argument here. Yes, Roman Polanski is a great filmmaker. Yes, Roman Polanski has had a case on him where he raped a 13-year-old girl in France and in US and has fled since then. Roman Polanski can be lauded, but the question is that if the 13-year-old girl was my daughter or my sister, then my argument would be completely different. I think we need to take that into account, that yes, material out there does have an impact on young minds, and it is very easily accessible.
Okay, I have limited time, so once again, Trisha, I'm coming to you. We've got instances of even young minors now indulging in quote-unquote gang rapes. They're filming these acts. And there's been an alarm over especially what is referred to as gang rape porn. Do you believe that there is indeed a very, very tricky, troubling situation in society where young kids are getting access to this kind of material very easily?
Let's be very specific about what we're talking about. If we are talking about rapes, gang rapes, and how to ensure we can keep our children and our women safe, right? Then we have to have a very honest conversation. And in that spirit, I wouldn't have gone back to an issue of 2012, but since your first panelist, Mr. Uday, cited a movie of Jism, which I don't even know is how many years old, I wish he'd also then spoken about his fellow BJP members who were caught back in 2012 watching pornography, who had to resign, and then as of 2019 was appointed as a deputy CM in Karnataka. I wish he'd spoken about his fellow members who were caught watching porn. Now, let's talk about also how do we make sure our women are safe. I wish Mr. Uday had spoken about why out of the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao fund, only 78%, more than 78% has been used by the current administration on media advocacy. inherently for cosmetic reasons, where the Parliamentary Standing Committee has asked the government to focus on education and health.
Okay,
to
so you are
ensure
saying this
that
is
our
not
women and
really the
children are
right tree
safe.
to bark on. There are other issues that can be taken
Oh,
care
I can
of.
assure you,
Dr.
this is
Jayanti
definitely
Datta,
the right
I'm
tree
really
to bark
sorry.
on
I
if you
have
want to be
only
serious
about 30
women's
seconds
empowerment
left on
as
the show.
opposed to
I want to
nonsense.
come, one second please. I want to come to you very quickly on what do you think parents can do as far as this issue is concerned about restricting access to explicit material for their kids. So ma'am, very quickly.
I'm amazed what kind of deliberations you made me listen to. We are talking about safety for the children. Now, in such cases, 3 months old child is raped. 8 years old child is accused that he attempted to rape. Now, if you don't exercise any control on this material which you are placing on the internet, you will not be able to control it at all, because children are curious and they, whatever they can lay their hands on, they will consume it, and they would try to take it out, implement it.
Okay.
I think I
Unfortunately,
agree
I've
with
run out
the
of time. I
gentleman
do
who-
regret the fact that we didn't have more time for our guests, but I do thank them for joining us. We are going to toss across to the right stand now.
स्पष्ट प्रमाण मिल जाएगा कि वो इस जन्मभूमि पे ही अवैध रूप से बनाए गए वो जो है शाही ईदगाह है।
वो ऑलरेडी प्रूवन है कि यहाँ पर ईदगाह है, वहाँ पर मंदिर है। लीगल एक्सपर्ट्स ये उनका मानना ये है कि सिविल डिस्प्यूट में अगर कोई सर्वे होता है तो लास्ट रिसॉर्ट होता है। आप पहला रिसॉर्ट में सर्वे कर रहे हैं।
Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. In May 2022, over a petition in the Krishna Janmasthan versus Shahi Eidgah case, there are many petitions in this matter at various courts. We are talking about the local court in Mathura, which upheld the maintainability of this civil suit, which said that this 13.37 acres of land on which the Krishna Janmasthan, that is what was deemed, there is the Shahi Eidgah, this has been built over what land belongs to, which is actually Krishna Janmabhoomi or Krishna Janmasthan, and that this land should be given back to the Hindus and should be by once again be the temple, because this Eidgah has been illegally constructed. It also challenged, ladies and gentlemen, the agreement that was made between the Hindu side and the Muslim side in 1968 and deemed that agreement as illegal. Let's try and understand what the court did on the 24th of December as it passed this order just about 2 days ago, where the court said it ordered the court officer or the revenue official attached to the civil court, who's called the Amin, to go and do a nirikshan, survey, match it with the land records, match it with the papers, see what is present there, and also perhaps measure this entire land area. Is it 13.37 acres? Is there a structure which shows that this the origin of the character? What is it? Has this structure been built on this land, this area which is being claimed by the Hindu Paksha's Krishna Janmasthan? Go ahead and do this. Now the order, the report has to be presented in a few days. The order actually says it has to be done inside of 3 days and then presented before the court, and the next hearing is sometime around the 20th of January. Let's try and understand what both sides are actually saying, and then we'll dive into the debate, ladies and gentlemen. What the Hindu Paksha is saying is that the Eidgah is actually built, has been built on Krishna Janmasthan, the actual birthplace of Krishna. Aurangzeb demolished this Krishna temple, and it was demolished in the 1600s. The Eidgah was constructed on the ruins in 1669, 1670. That's what it says. The Eidgah or the mosque should actually be demolished. Aurangzeb, but what does the Muslim side says? That the Eidgah or this mosque comes under the Places of Worship Act or the POW Act 1991. The Hindu side actually signed an agreement in 1968. Like I said, the veracity of that agreement and that it should be deemed illegal has also been challenged by this petition by a Hindu Sena leader. Hindu side says, has twisted the facts in court, and this survey shouldn't be used as the first resort. This is what you heard Asaduddin Owaisi also say, that land records or a survey is actually something which is supposed to be the last resort. The question, ladies and gentlemen, is that area 13.37 acres? Is this structure standing upon a place whose original character is different? Now, if you look at Ram Janmabhoomi, there is Kashi Vishwanath or Gyanvapi and Krishna Janmabhoomi. Three critical areas, critical aspects of Hindu Astha which have constantly been under question, and because this has been challenged in the courts now as a civil or a land dispute, then comes into play the Places of Worship Act 1991, beg your pardon. The larger question we are asking is, why should there be such nervousness and why be rattled by just a survey? All that the court has said is go ahead and check whether what is being claimed by one of the plaintiffs, is that true or false? What is wrong with going